Would you ask Mr. Evans to come back in, please? Thank you. Right, Mr. Evans, ready to carry on?
I am, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Evans, can I ask you to be shown CEL 403121, please? This is an email on the 16th of May 2014 from you to John Roper, subject above 18 metres. Now, just putting it in its chronological context, this is 2 days after the second day of the MAG meeting, all right? And you start the email by saying, another one for my 4 and a bit hour journey home, if I'm lucky. Absolutely agree with all these points. I will give my view on some of this when we speak. And just so you know, what he was sending to you was a long, detailed email about the marketing of RS5000. And then you say, please add the meeting with Jonathan Cheeseman with SG Legal to your list. I think Craig was looking at Friday the 30th, late afternoon, once the bus event is over. Just pausing there, what's the bus event? Is that the business event?
No, the bus event is the 3-month tour of the UK that Celotex undertook between March and May.
Oh, I see. So bus means bus?
Yes, bus means bus.
Right. Can you please, this afternoon, speak with Catherine to ask her to approach Jonathan to arrange the meeting? Content-wise, your MAG presentation can provide all the background we need to explain our approach. And then please check with Carol on PR availability to visit NHBC with you. Ideally, we need all these items completed by month end. Well done on this. The MAG presentation that you're referring to there, that's clearly a document, isn't it?
Yes.
What was the MAG presentation? Was it the long 17-page one we know he sent you during the meeting on the 14th of May, or was it the shorter version?
I wouldn't recall which one of those two I meant.
Right. Looking at the purpose of your reference to it there, was it the document that you were planning to send to Jonathan Cheeseman at SG Legal?
I don't know whether we were sending the document to Jonathan or that was just for the meeting for Jonathan on the 30th.
Right. Can we take it, though, from this, that when you said content-wise your MAG presentation can provide all the background we need to explain our approach, we know you saw the 17-page version by this stage. Can we take it that you had looked at and satisfied yourself that the full content of the MAG presentation was something which could form the background to what you were going to explain to the legal department?
I believe the MAG presentation, I don't know which one of those two would have provided the detail that we wanted to use for that meeting, yes.
Right. You were sufficiently familiar with the contents of that presentation to be able to form the opinion that it was something which could be used to explain the background?
On the basis of the date of the email and that it was only just after that MAG meeting, then yes.
Thank you. Now, can I go to the topic of NHBC? We've already discussed together the meeting that Mr. Roper had with you in your office on the 19th of June about NHBC and their potential concerns. I want to look at the period post-launch. Can we go to CEL 401020, please? This is an email from John Roper to you on the 5th of September 2019, and it relates to ongoing problems with the NHBC accepting the test. It's a long email, but that's the topic of it. Do you remember reading this email at the time?
I can't say now whether I recall reading it.
And it's addressed to all, and he explained that was because this was a draft email that he wanted to send to people. Do you remember that?
Not specifically, no.
And he was asking you to sign it off.
Okay.
Now, in the fourth paragraph there, he refers to competition with Kingspan. And he says, you just blow it up, thank you. It says, I've also been told of a number of occasions now that Kingspan K15 has successfully tested to BS8414 Part 2 2005 onto steel frame, METSEC. This has apparently only happened recently and has not been included in their BBA certificate. To support any potential challenges we may face with the NHBC on the way we've tested, i.e. thickness and choice of cladding panel, sheathing board, etc., it's imperative we understand how K15, that seemingly is accepted by NHBC, has tested to 8414 Part 2 2005. I'm told that the system used a cement particle board rather than a non-combustible sheathing board and a combustible cladding panel. The details in particular around what type of panel was used for the exterior of this system are crucial and would hugely aid our argumentation. Were Celotex adopting a strategy of seeking to put pressure on the NHBC into accepting your BR135 classification by pointing out to them that they'd accepted Kingspans?
Don't think we were putting pressure on the NHBC. I think there would have been a question asked within the business, which is why is Kingspan K15 able to be used on NHBC projects and Celotex isn't?
Putting the question in a slightly different way, were you seeking to, was the strategy to seek to persuade NHBC that because they had previously accepted Kingspan's BR135 and BS8414 test, then they should do the same with yours?
I think we would want to understand if we could, and if not, why we couldn't.
And in the penultimate paragraph, you say, having led the way in being transparent of the tested system that complied with BR135, we hope that contractors will challenge our competitors to provide the same information to have a true understanding of what has been tested. Now, it's simply not true, is it, that Celotex had been transparent about the system which complied with BR135, is it?
Based on the information that I now have, then it wasn't the system marketed wasn't the same as the system tested.
Celotex had not been transparent about the system tested, had it?
No, it hadn't.
And you knew that?
Again, when I was launching the product, that information that I had been made aware of wasn't in my thinking when we signed the marketing and launch off.
Well, we've been through that. Now, can we go to CEL 401022, please? This is an email at the bottom of page 1 and onto the top of page 2, if we can just look at that, from NHBC, John Behan, of the 22nd of September 2014. And if we start at the bottom of page 1, we can see that message, and we'll come to that in a minute. But just to show you saw this, if we scroll up page 1, John Roper receives that email from Michael Healy, and then if we scroll up for page 1 a little bit more, we get to John Roper sending that to you, FYI. So you saw this email chain, at least according to this email run. And if we go to John Behan's email at the bottom of page 1 and onto page 2, what he says there, and let's look at the top of page 2, certification recently achieved. Celotex Technical Department are fully aware of the issues raised. And if you look a little bit lower down the same page, page 2, you can see towards the bottom of page 2 an email from John Behan to Michael Healy, which says, at present Celotex holds no relevant testing certification for the insulation to be used above 18 metres. This has been discussed between technical departments of both NHBC and Celotex. When you saw this email run, did you understand that John Behan was saying that as far as NHBC was concerned, it would not accept RS 5000 above 18 metres on any project?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Yeah. Can we go to CEL 403445, please? This takes us to January 2015, and if we look at the email you get at the top of the page from Nigel Waring, It's copied to you. It's sent to John Roper, copied to you for your information. And what you get is an email from Nigel Shields of Durcan to Nigel Waring of Celotex, also on the 7th of January, where Nigel Shields of Durcan says, "Morning, Nigel." This is a Nigel to Nigel email. Having discussed the use of insulation with the NHBC yesterday and what they're looking for in terms of third-party assurance, they're looking for BBA accreditation. They would not accept the fire test certification you have at present, as in their words, it does not represent a true test of the product in all of its applications. They are claiming that it does burn, as does Kingspan K15 product, and are very nervous of it being used in high-rise buildings. They are currently consulting with the fire brigade on the use of these materials. Did you ever hear anything further about this consultation with the fire brigade?
Not that I can remember, no.
Did the NHBC ever raise these concerns that they expressed in this email to Nigel Waring with you?
I don't believe so.
When you saw Nigel Shields' message to Nigel Waring, which I've just read to you, did that not come as a bit of a shock to you?
I don't recall how I felt when I saw the email. I think we knew after launch that we might not be allowed on NHBC projects, and that we would carry on having a dialogue with the NHBC to understand what we needed to do to be allowed.
Did you regard yourself as on notice now that the NHBC regarded your BS 8414 test as unrepresentative and RS 5000 as dangerous, at least if used in applications other than that specifically tested?
I understood that NHBC wouldn't accept our product on those projects, then we wouldn't be accepted.
And it's not just a question of acceptance, is it? It's also the fact that they now regarded the use of your product on or in cladding systems other than exactly that which had been tested under your BS 8414 certificate test as dangerous.
Yes, that's what they're saying.
Yeah. And that must have come as something of a shock to you, no? Or was it something you always knew?
I wouldn't say it was something we always knew. I think we just knew that the NHBC at that point wanted more information from Celotex on the next stage, maybe for the product.
We don't see you going to your marketing department or asking either John Roper, who I think had left and gone into sales by this point, so Debbie Berger. We don't see you saying to them, look, you must tell all the salespeople to reinforce the message that RS 5000 can only be used in a system which is exactly the same as that tested. Now, leave aside the magnesium oxide. We don't see you doing that, do we?
I think and I can't remember the dates, but there's been projects and emails I've seen of projects where I've said that it has to be in line with the system as we tested. So I don't think it changed my approach to what we were saying on projects.
But this is the NHBC coming to you and telling you that your certification is unacceptable because the product burns, and that it's not a representative of a true test in the product of all of its applications. My question really is, why didn't that spur you to reinforce the message that was already in the marketing literature and get it out there into the market, that actually, in reality, RS 5000 shouldn't be used at all unless it was part of a system exactly as tested?
I don't know why we didn't reinforce the message.
Well, can I suggest why? It suited you commercially to keep selling RS 5000 for as long as you could. That's the reason, isn't it?
I don't believe that was the strategy. I think the strategy that we'd had from launch going forward, which was, here's the marketing material, here's how we've tested the product, and it was for others to decide whether they felt that the product could be used in in alternative systems.
Well, is that really a fair summary of the strategy, Mr. Evans? From all the documents we've seen, wouldn't a fairer summary of the strategy be, here is the product, here are some marketing materials which have a big banner telling you that it's usable above 18 metres, and some small print with a qualification, and hope that some people won't pick up the qualification and buy it for use in systems other than that exactly which tested?
Certainly from my side, by making the system noticeable on the specification literature and other things we put in place on, like the U-value calculator as a warning box before people selected the RS application. I don't believe that was what I was thinking we should be doing.
And worse than that, even the most scrupulous of specialists in the market reading your marketing literature would never know that in fact even the system as tested, as described, wasn't in fact as tested.
No.
And that was also part of your marketing strategy, to get this product away into the market, compete with Kingspan, and make as much money from it as possible in order to satisfy Saint-Gobain's commercial ambitions for it.
That wasn't part of the marketing strategy that I had discussed at the time. We had said we'd done a system test and that the system was going to be marketed clearly about it being a system and marketed to those guidelines.
Can we look at CEL 403660, please? And I'd like, and this is a very long email chain, and I'd like to go to page 7, please, which we will find is an email from Mark Wakeling at Barclay Group on the 5th of March 2015 at 9:53 to Jonathan Room, copied to Richard John. And if we look up the chain in this email chain, we see you're copied in on it. We just scroll up, I think, to page 6. Probably go a little bit higher up than that. If we go up 2 more, we can find that you see it there to the bottom of page 5, over to page 6. Jonathan Room sends this to you on the 1st of May. As it comes to your attention, copy to Richard John, and the subject is Celotex RS 5000 and the NHBC. Hi Paul, we're being chased on a response regarding the RS claim by the SFS manufacturer to Barclay Group, St Edward. Can you let me have an official response to the claim? So that's how it comes to your attention with a request. Now, if we look back, please, to Mr. Wakeling's email at page 7, I want to ask you about that. He says, this is Wakeling of Barclay Group, 5th of March. Jonathan, I've had 2 recent meetings with 2 different NHBC special project surveyors. Whilst nothing has been officially issued by NHBC, both advised NHBC would no longer approve the use of PIR or phenolic insulation in buildings taller than 18 metres. As it stands, they will only accept the approach outlined by the BCA as attached. 1, material of limited combustibility, e.g. rock wool. 2, evidence-based approval from BRE or similar for the precise wall construction. 3, actual fire test data. The above impacts on both our 190 Strand and PH8A Stanmore projects. I'm advised a major UK SFS company, I prefer not to state their name, conducted a fire test with RS 5000, option 3 of BCA guidance, and they had to abandon the test as the insulation caught on fire, quotes, very quickly, unquotes. Now, when you received this email chain, did you read Mr. Wakeling's email some way down the chain towards the foot?
I don't recall. I think I understand the last paragraph of there because I recall where we took that conversation. Now, whether that came from that email or a separate follow-up from this email, which I didn't read, I don't know.
Right. And the reality is that options 1, 2, and 3, of those 3 options, you had pursued 2, which was the BS 8414 test, hadn't you?
Yes.
And 3, actual fire test data, you didn't have, if that's what is meant by desktop. What was your reaction to this email? Do you remember?
I don't recall any reaction I had to it. As I said, I can remember the work we then did with the major SFS company,
Right.
which I think we did well, which I think is related to that point. But I don't know whether that came, as I said, from a different conversation or email that came to me.
Now, Mr. Room had forwarded this email to you asking for an official response to the claim. Had he done that? Because although Mr. Roper and Debbie Berger were the project managers for RS 5000, in reality, you were the senior person overseeing it and always had been.
I think Jonathan would have sent it to me. Yes, because of the role I had in the business, and probably knowing that some words would need to be put together.
And if we scroll up in the email chain, please, to page 4, we can see that at the bottom of page 4 and over onto page 5, Richard John comes back to Jonathan Room and to you and says, both, I feel that we need to respond to Mark with a lot of thought. As you both know, this has been hanging around now for a few months, and we have to make sure that our response alludes to the fact that we have been very active over this time period. Now, that's right, isn't it? This has been hanging around for a few months. In other words, the concern that NHBC had with Celotex's 8414 test and the question about whether it was properly representative of systems being commonly used in the market at the time was one which had been hanging around, in fact, since the middle of June 2014.
Yes, certainly from those emails, and after the launch, we had an email chain from the September.
And really, the time had now come for Celotex to decide what its position was and formulate it properly. Is that right?
Yes, that would be right.
And we can see that your reaction to this is to set up a call. There's talk about a call in Richard John's email, and in the middle of the page, on page 4, you say, are you both available now? I can send some conference call details and we can get 10 minutes on this now. Do you think 10 minutes was really going to cover it? This was a complex subject on a delicate issue in relation to a major new project. Do you think it could be just covered in 10 minutes? Or did it require a lot of thought, as Richard John had suggested?
I don't think I'm saying that it's only 10 minutes to finish it, to start it and finish it. Right. I think that's maybe just an introductory call to kick things off.
I see. And if we look up the page onto page 3, what the page is onto page 3, we can see there's some rather standard discussion about arranging a call. Richard John says no, can do first thing Tuesday morning on a CC, and you go back, cool, arrange now. Jonathan will call later this afternoon to explain my views, having gone through this again. Did you go through that again with Jonathan Room?
I don't know.
Or Jonathan Roper, if it's a different Jonathan?
I don't know.
Did you have a discussion on that day with, it's the 1st of May, with either Jonathan Room or Jonathan Roper to explain your views?
If I said there was going to be a call, well, I can't see why we wouldn't have had that call.
Right. Do you remember what your views were that you explained, if you did have that call?
I believe my views would have been consistent with what we were saying at that time, which was around the system has been tested, and until we have other testing or desktop studies or other options, then that's what we need to carry on with.
If we look up the chain, we, I think, might be able to time the call more precisely. If we go to page 2, there's an email string which one normally sees when people are on the phone or setting up a meeting. And the long and the short of it is that a meeting on the 5th of May was arranged and people were dialing into it. If you just scroll up page 2 and then into page 1. For example, on page 1 at the foot you say, you see that Jonathan Room says to you and Richard John, I'm on waiting. And then so is Richard John, if we can see the top email. So it looks like there was a call to discuss this very topic on the 5th of May, if not earlier. Do you remember that?
I don't remember the call, but it looks like there was a call being made.
Do you remember what the upshot was?
I don't remember, no.
So that's the 5th of May. We can turn on to the 6th of May. Next day, CEL 40s 2037. This is an email from Jonathan Room forwarding you an email chain from Squire and Partners. As we can see from the bottom of page 1 now on the screen. And there's a bit of a history to this from pages 2 and 3, and I'll summarise it for you, I think. If we go to page 2 and over to page 3, we can see that Squire and Partners, who are architects, we go to the bottom of page 2, we can see that NHBC were communicating with Matthew College, who was at Squire and Partners, an architect, about the use of phenolic insulation in high-rise buildings. And if you go to the top of page 3, you can see what the issue is. It says in the second line there, the issue remains that for sites started before in December 2013, Kingspan should have been consulted on buildings over 18 metres, and they should have confirmed that the facade had been assessed by them and is fine for use in that particular building. This is as per the requirements of the BBA certification, etc. The BBA certificate has since been amended to include a wall type which has been tested, terracotta rain screen, and if the construction is exactly as this BBA cert, then that would be acceptable. But this is the only test Kingspan have had approved, but are ongoing further tests on differing wall types at the moment, and to try and demonstrate suitability. So to answer your question, unless the wall is made up exactly as described in the Celotex BBA certificate, which I understand used a large Eternit rain screen board, you will have to demonstrate compliance using the guidance shown in a closed BCA document. If you decide to revert back to the Kingspan product, then confirmation should be sought from Kingspan that K15 is acceptable for your build-up, assuming you haven't already got this. Now, you obviously weren't in on this email, and there isn't a BBA certificate for RS5000, as we know. So that, I think, must be a reference to something else. But that's the background to it. If we go up then, please, to page 2, we can see the way this comes about. Matthew College writes to Jonathan Room and says, Jonathan, please see below, I will call to discuss. And then Jonathan Room at the top of page 2 over to page 1, bottom of page 1, sends this to you. Paul, interesting information from Squire and Partners, architects, regarding conversations with NHBC, non-committal, and claims that Kingspan have a new BBA encompassing the testing of terracotta build-up, although I cannot find any BBA newer than December 2013. And then you go back to him. Jonathan, thanks for sending through. Clearly shows the change in NHBC approach from around February on this area. We are aware of Kingspan's testing on terracotta, but as you say, yet to see this transfer into a new BBA. However, looking at the BBA website just now, the K15 certificate is a more recent version than the one you attached. This new issue 2 is dated December 2013, but looking at the fire section still references part 1 of BS 8414 and no reference to terracotta cladding as the panel. Now, in your reference there to shows the change in NHBC approach from around February on this area, what did you mean by that, looking at the full emails chain that we'd looked at? What was the change?
I think February was around the time where Celotex were made aware of a project on, I can't remember the exact name of the project, where the contractor had complained to Celotex about RS5000 being used, and when we investigated it, and I don't know how long later, it transpired that the NHBC had actually signed off the building or were okay for the project to carry on. So I think my comment there is that we were seeing that the NHBC had signed a NHBC project off with Celotex being used on it.
Is that the Octavius Street project Ardmore.
Ardmore, that's right.
Right, well, we're going to come to some detailed questions on that shortly. But you think that in February, NHBC's position changed, did you? And just tell us in a nutshell what the change you detected was.
That they had that they had looked to approve or had said approved Celotex's product on that particular project.
Well,
which I believe
that's not a general change in approach. That's maybe a change on a project. It looks from this as if you're saying that this particular exchange shows the change in NHBC approach from around February on this area. It doesn't look like you mean on this particular project, but on the applicability of BS 8414 system tests to a wider set of applications than the test itself. Is that what you're referring to?
I think the fact that it's dated February, the evidence that I've seen, that was an example of where we saw something in the NHBC change in February insofar as allowing a Celotex product to be used on a NHBC project.
Right, so your evidence is that before February 2015, you thought that NHBC would allow your BR135 and BS 8414 test results to be used on a wider set of systems than that which was tested?
I think the market intelligence we were getting from the launch was that the NHBC was saying you can't use Celotex, and then from this event in the February, they had said that it could be used, albeit on one particular project.
Right. Now, given those concerns, it's clear, isn't it, that the NHBC were not, at least by this time, prepared to approve RS 5000 on the basis of only one test?
That they were...
They were not.
They were not... Sorry, can you say that again, please? Sorry.
It's clear by this time, wasn't it, or isn't it, that at this point, or by this point, the NHBC were not prepared to approve the use of RS 5000 based only on the single test that you had achieved.
No, they weren't.
And Mr. Room, in his witness statement, says that he raised the need for further testing a number of times and continued to push Celotex management to commit further investment in testing or in desktop studies. Can you tell us why no further BS 8414 tests were carried out so as to be able to satisfy the NHBC?
I think there was always a plan to do more testing. I think that process took a longer amount of time than Jonathan Room wanted it to, but I know that there was then the evolution into desktop studies, and the BCA document, which Celotex, or certainly I don't believe myself and the project team were aware of when we launched the product, then came into the business, I think around March, April of that year, and therefore there was a route to compliance through the BCA route.
When you say the BCA route, do you mean desktop studies?
I think desktop studies was one option on that document.
Well, the desktop studies was first mentioned in a BCA document in issue 0 of its technical guidance note 18, which had been issued in June 2014. Did you know that?
As I said, we didn't know that in June 2014 that document existed.
So when did you come to learn about the possibility of desktop studies?
I believe around desktop studies in line with the BCA document around... can't remember exactly when, March, April 2015, because that's when it was sent into the product marketing team.
And when did the first... Did Celotex actually ever get a desktop study for RS 5000 that would safely show that it could be used on systems other than that which had been tested under the BS 8414 test?
We certainly sent our test report to a third party and started commissioning desktop studies, yes.
Did you ever get any?
I thought we did.
When?
They were. I can't remember the exact date without seeing the evidence.
Right. Does the gradual arrival of desktop studies explain why there was no further BS 8414 test?
Yes, that would be the main reason.
And did the NHBC, looking at it in general terms, come to accept Celotex's desktop studies when giving approval for projects which were different from the project which had been the subject of the BS 8414 test?
I don't know how many of those projects which we got desktop studies for were NHBC projects, so I don't know.
Let's look at paragraph 169 of your statement. You say there, at page 49, that you believe you were not aware of BCA, the BCA guidance note, which is Technical Guidance Note 18, until around March 2015. And you say, a little bit lower down the paragraph, 4 lines up from the bottom, had I been aware of it sooner, I believe that the contents of the guidance note would not only have been reflected in the marketing materials, but would have focused attention much earlier on the possibility of desktop studies being a route to achieve a wider field of application. Can we then go to CEL 401075? This is an email from March 2015 between RMA Architects and Celotex. This particular email is an email from Jonathan Room to you, Mr. Evans, copied to Debbie Berger, but the context of this is a request for a desktop study. And can we go to pages 5 and 6 where we see that? And we have to work up from the bottom, I'm afraid, at page 6, just to trace the context of this long email chain. And at the bottom of page 5, top of page 6, we can see this is an email from James Kirkman to Jonathan Room. And James Kirkman is an architect at RMA Architects. This is 27th of February 2015. That's bottom of page 5. Top of page 6, second paragraph. I've attached our typical wall build-up drawings. Could you confirm if we were to replace the current rigid insulation spec with the Celotex RS5000, if the build-up has been assessed according to the assessment criteria in BR135 fire performance of external insulation for walls of multi-storey buildings? If so, could you provide the certification to that effect? If not, then are Celotex able to have a desktop study report from a suitable independent UCAS-accredited testing body, BRE, Chiltern Fire or Warrington Fire, stating whether, in their opinion, BR135 criteria would be met with the proposed system? That's the background. And if we go up then to page 5, we can see that Jonathan Room sends that to sends a response to James Kirkman and says that Celotex has been successfully tested to BS 8414 Part 2, and so can be considered for use in buildings above 18 metres. So thoroughly misleading, as we've discussed before. Yes?
Yes, without the additional information that should have been sent with it.
Yeah. Please find attached a copy of our rain screen cladding compliance guide, which gives details of our fire test and some background to the building regulations requirements. So he does provide the cladding compliance guide, which does contain the caveat, as we know. So his misleading statement has got to be qualified by the fact that he does send the compliance guide with it, and also attaches a copy of our BRE classification report. And then at the end he says, currently we're not able to provide a desktop study. And then if you go to page 4, the architect, we can see, comes back. This is now Sam Hanscom of RMA, and says, I think we're nearly there with NHBC and Ardmore are very tempted to switch from Kingspan to Celotex. Are you able to have a desktop study done by BRE, Warrington Fire or Chiltern Fire, to confirm in their opinion BR135 criteria would be met with our exact proposed systems? So that's his question. And if we go to the top of page, well, bottom of page 3, top of page 4, we can see Jonathan Room's response to Sam Hanscom, which is basically no. Hi Sam, currently we're unable to have a desktop study completed at the moment, although we are investigating for the future. We are only able to provide you with the current test data as already supplied for now. Apologies for not being able to support you further at this time, which is what he says at the top of page 4. We can just show that. Yes. Thank you. And then if we go to the bottom of page 2, and I'm sorry to take so long over this lengthy email string, but it's right that I should put it out there and show it to you. Jonathan Room writes to you on the 16th of March and says, Sam thinks that the client may even pay for a desktop study to be completed. And at the top of page 2, bottom of page 1, you say, hi Jonathan, as discussed, we need to fully understand the process and requirements of the desktop study. Debbie is looking at this in more detail. When we have further information, we will let you know. Now, what did you need to understand about the processes and requirements of a desktop study?
I don't know, other than understanding who did them, how they worked, what the costs were. Just it's a new way for Celotex products to be used in buildings above 18 metres, and I would have asked Debbie to have done that to understand in a little bit more detail.
And you do go on to say that that Debbie is looking at this in detail. What was the upshot of that? Do you remember?
My understanding of that is that we then moved to some discussions with the NHBC around some build-ups that they suggested to Debbie, and we commissioned some desktop studies to be done.
That may explain then the next string of emails, but it may not. You say you commissioned some desktop studies to be done. Did you commission them specifically for this product, the Limehouse Basin project?
I don't believe so, no.
Right. So what happened with the Limehouse Basin project? Did the client keep with K15, or did they
I don't know.
go over to Celotex? You don't know.
I don't know.
At this stage, did you wonder how any of these professionals were going to be able to do a desktop study if you only gave them the BRE test report and the classification report?
No, because if we're talking about the likes of the BRE and Warrington and Chiltern, to go with that, we would have sent the full details of the test report.
When you say the full details of the test report, would that have included the fact that in the test itself there was the presence of 6 millimetres of magnesium oxide at two places on the rig, overtopped with 8 millimetres of Marley Eternit?
No, we wouldn't have sent. We would have sent the test report, which we were given for the launch of the product.
So is this right, that even if you were commissioning a desktop study in response to the market's requirements for one, the instructions for the desktop study would have been as misleading as the test report and the classification report?
Based on what we've covered since the launch and the documents I've seen, then yes.
So the product, a desktop study which came out of that process, would be similarly misleading, wouldn't it?
If the information, which it wasn't available to the person doing the desktop study, then yes.
Yeah. Was there ever any intention to come clean with the likes of BRE, Exova, Warrington, whoever it was who would have done the desktop studies, and show them exactly what the test build-up really was, as opposed to the way it had been presented in your marketing literature and in the test and classification reports?
From my side, again, that information wasn't in my mind when we launched the product. Therefore, there wouldn't have been any reason to go back to that, because I didn't know what we had done. I didn't know what we were what we had done was just had moved on. So I wouldn't have gone back to those pre-launch details, because I wasn't aware of them and they weren't front of mind.
Let's move on then with the same topic, see where that particular issue comes out. CEL 403589, please. This is an email chain, and I'm sorry, Mr. Evans, that these chains are quite long, but this one is from Debbie Berger to Franz Papp of Exova, copied to you on the 18th of March 2015. And she sends Franz Papp a copy of the 32-page test report for BS 8414 Part 2 and some examples of 4 build-ups. Now, is this what you meant in your earlier email when you said that Debbie Berger was looking into a desktop study?
Yes.
Right, okay. And if we look at this page, and we can see you saw it, she lists the 4 systems that she wanted configured. Now, let's just look at them a little bit closely. She says, please find also some examples of 4 build-ups which we commonly see presented to us at design stage. Design 1, inside to out, and they're all inside to out, I should say. And you have 2 times 12.5 millimetre plasterboard, 100 millimetres SFS, 100 millimetres calcium silicate board A1, 100 millimetres Celotex RS5000, unventilated cavity, 103 millimetres brickwork facade, stainless steel ties. So that's design 1. And if you look down, they are the next three designs, design 2, 3, and 4, are all the same in that they are ventilated cavities, same as each other and different from one. They are all for ventilated cavities as opposed to unventilated cavities. They've all got brackets and rails, and the only thing that's different between them is the cladding. In design 2, you've got terracotta cladding. Design 3, you've got cladding laminates. And design 4, you've got aluminium class naught. I think I'm right in saying that the rest of them are the same as between the three of them, and altogether different, or at least substantially different from design 1. Have I summarised it accurately, do you think?
Yes.
And she goes on to say, I think these best represent what's commonly specified, and in particular what NHBC commonly see. The analysis will hopefully help us to better understand the risky parts of cladding systems. It will also provide us with some insights on RS5000 fire behaviour and contribution to this risk. Now, first, had you been involved with Debbie Berger about the discussions about what system Celotex was going to seek a report for?
From memory, Debbie had said she was going to speak to the NHBC to get some guidance on the different types of build-ups.
So you think she got these from the NHBC, do you? Not from in-house expertise?
I don't know, but the fact that she said, and in particular what NHBC commonly see, and I know that she did speak to someone at the NHBC, I saw that in some previous evidence.
What was the reason for seeking to obtain this report? Was it because there had been customer pressure, such as we've seen before?
I think there was feedback from the market about the product being used in different applications with different cladding systems, and therefore the BCA guidance, which we'd only just been made aware of, gave an option for us to start this desktop study route.
Now, she says, as I've shown you at the bottom of the page, it will also provide us with some insights on RS5000 fire behaviour and contribution to this risk. Do you agree that that was one of the purposes of seeking a desktop study from Mr. Papp, ex-over?
My understanding was that we were looking at different systems and how they could be assessed as a desktop study.
Now, we saw, I think yesterday, that you had known, I think since June 2013, that RS5000 was very unlikely to pass with an aluminium cladding, because we saw that from the notes of the SOTEC meeting that Mr. Roper had attended in June 2013, and again in October 2013. We saw that.
Yes.
So you already knew, didn't you, that the combination of RS5000 and cladding aluminium class naught, which was designed for, was a risky combination?
I don't know whether I knew about all of the different types of aluminium cladding to have been able to say yes or no to that.
We can see what it is that Debbie Berger sent to Franz Papp, and it's a copy of the full test report, the 32-page test report, the BS8414 Part 2. She says it's 32 pages. Did you notice that it was not the full 35-page version?
No.
Did you notice that whatever it was she was sending, she didn't indicate to Franz Papp what was not in the report, namely that the test build-up, the rig build-up as tested, included 6 millimetres of magnesium oxide in 2 places on the rig and 8 millimetres of Marley Eternit as cladding at those points?
No.
You didn't notice that?
I don't think I would have looked at the test report. This is the test report we had in the business at that time, and my understanding at the time was that that was the test report that needed to be used.
But you knew at the time that the test report omitted those 2 critical elements of the test rig as described, didn't you?
Based on what I've seen since, but not at the time, that's not where my thinking was.
and as you accept, I think, any desktop study done by Mr. Papp based on that test report would have been incomplete and misleading and wholly unreliable, because Mr. Papp would not have been informed of the true test build-up. That's right, isn't it?
Based on what I've seen since, yes.
And I would suggest to you, given what I've put to you earlier, that you did know that, and that you deliberately and intentionally did not correct Ms. Berger and ensure that Mr. Papp got the full information.
No, that's not where I was with my understanding and thinking of this launch.
Can we then turn to the Octavius Street project, which you referred to just a moment ago in your evidence? CEL 402193. This is a lengthy letter of complaint from Ardmore Construction Limited to Paul Reed. It says, "Dear Paul, please be advised that your Celotex RS 5000 insulation product has been deemed unacceptable for use by NHBC at our Octavius Street project, a mixed-use development of some 121 apartments and commercial space. The NHBC have stated that your products are flammable and are therefore not to be incorporated into buildings over 18 metres in height, of which Octavius Street is one such. We enclose here their refusal notice for your comment. We're well on with the build process, see attached site pics, and this refusal notice on the part of the NHBC has very serious implications in both cost and programme to the project, with of course further consequential costs for the delay incurred directly resultant from the non-compliance of your products. Your available product literature and data sheets for this product does not state that it is not suitable for use as rain screen insulant in buildings over 18 metres. Your company has been well aware of this project and full knowledge of the respective detailing. We have been in contact via email and telephone with Jeremy Suttle, Celotex Technical Services Officer. Clearly, you're an international supplier and manufacturer of some repute, and we are amazed that you send products to market that are not suitable for their intended use. You must have test data for these products, which you appear to be reluctant to share with us. Is there some technical reason for your reluctance? Currently, we are faced with total removal of your product and substitution with a compliant material, which is clearly a huge issue in both time and money to us. This action is extreme, to say the least, and we look to you to immediately provide unequivocal, laboratory-supported evidence that your products have been fire tested to prove beyond doubt that they meet the requirements of surface spread of flame and general combustibility for buildings about over 18 metres in height. It would seem, if we can turn the page, unimaginable that a company with the market size of yours and technical expertise cannot provide such evidence. We require receipt by same by return. In the unlikely event that you have no such evidence, then we would suggest you notify all of the national building control warranty bodies, together with the wider construction industry, advising that your products are not for use over 18 metres. Furthermore, please notify your insurers accordingly of your failure to provide products suitable for their intended use. We will be seeking full recompense for all of our costs, both direct and indirect, incurred as an absolute consequence of your failures. We trust you recognise this lamentable state of affairs we have here and treat this matter with the utmost attention that it deserves from the most senior people in your business within the shortest possible time frame. Yours faithfully, Richard Hunt, Technical Director. Now, there's not a lot in that letter which could be possibly misunderstood, is there?
No.
Now, it doesn't appear to have been copied to you on the 23rd of March 2015, but you became aware of the dispute a little bit later. This was a clear allegation, as you, I suggest, must have realised when you saw this letter, that the Celotex product literature was, to put it at its lowest, insufficiently clear. You must have realised that was at least the point they were making, to put it at its lowest.
Yes, that's what they were saying, that it was not in line with the literature.
And they were calling you out on your refusal to issue full test data.
Yes.
Now, if we look at, so that's the letter. Let's look at the correspondence around it. If we go to CEL 402193, please. We can see that if we go to page 4 in that email run, CEL 402193, we need the bottom of page 3, top of page 4. This is what starts it off. Here is Dave White of NHBC writing to Ben Whitaker, copied to various people, but including Richard Hunt, the signatory of the letter of the 23rd of March we've just seen. And in fact, if you go to the top of page 3, we can see that there is the email of the 23rd of March, which sends this on. But I want to focus with you on the email from Dave White to Ben Whitaker, into which Mr. Hunt had been copied, of the 11th of March. Now, Dave White was the self-same Dave White whom Mr. Roper had met at Hadley, Celotex's premises, on the 19th of June 2014, along with his colleague, Mr. Perrior.
Yes.
So he was known to Celotex. And he says, "Hello, Ben. Re Octavia Street, Ardmore, Deptford project development. Fire performance of phenolic insulation, Celotex RS 5000. And I don't want to read it all out to you, but I can pick out the salient points. Under paragraph 1, he's dealing with the masonry outer leaf facade. And under D there, he says the 50 millimetre thick phenolic type rigid insulation board product Celotex RS 5000 is not fully resistant to fire and will burn in fire. And then under paragraph 2, he says under letter D, the 80, and this is in relation to the terraced balcony areas of the building, under D, the 80 millimetre thick phenolic rigid insulation board product Celotex RS 5000 is not fully resistant to fire and will burn in fire. And then if we turn the page, please. He says under paragraph 4, other insulated parts of the building envelope, for example, curtain walling panel types on lower level facade zones, are not referred to in the BWC report. Also, in this report, the continuous rain screen facades that extend the full height of the building are not fully assessed in terms of fire performance and level of safety stroke risk, for example, relating to the mechanism of fire spread within the concealed cavity where combustible insulation is installed behind an aluminium rain screen facade. To my knowledge, this specific type of rain screen has never been tested by Celotex under the BR 135 requirements. And that's correct, isn't it? It hadn't.
No, it hadn't.
Para 5. It is apparent from reading your report that access to the full final version of the BRE Fire Test Report 295255 for Celotex for RS 5000 was unfortunately not possible. Therefore, I feel that some of the assumptions made in your report on likely fire performance of this facade in comparison with what actually occurred during the testing are not strictly accurate. Now, this seems to have been the basis on which Richard Hunt of Ardmore concluded that some of the assumptions that Ardmore had made were not accurate. Was this an indication that to you, when you saw this, that the refusal to issue the full test report was leading to difficulties?
I can recall from the letter that we received from Ardmore that was something that I then made sure that we had a discussion. I remember Craig Chambers, myself, and I think Rob, and maybe Paul Reed having a discussion in the boardroom at Hadley about this, because it was the first time that we'd had our product being used and this level of correspondence coming from it.
You say this level of correspondence, you mean this level of complaint?
Yes.
CEL 401080, please. Here's an email of the 24th of March 2015, so the day after, it appears the day after Richard Hunt had sent the Ardmore letter in to Celotex. And it comes to you, copied to Debbie Berger and Louise Garlick. Timeline on inquiries from Ardmore to Celotex. Paul, please see attached for timeline of events as best we can piece them together. There were a number of CTC people involved, and not all interactions would have been recorded on Salesforce. It includes telephone conversations we've had with Ardmore. It should help to form a response to the letter. At the moment, we have other HBC project inquiries in the technical inbox, and we're holding off responding. Otherwise, we are in danger of ending up in the same boat as the Ardmore inquiry. My view on NHBC projects is that we turn them away and say we're not suitable up front until we have evidence to the contrary. Why had that not been the position anyway, even before the Ardmore complaint letter?
I don't know.
Well, because you were riding your luck is one possible reason. Is that wrong?
I don't think, certainly didn't. My understanding is that we weren't riding our luck, is that there was projects that came back to us from NHBC from the launch, and some of those projects we weren't, or all of those projects we weren't able to supply our material for. Then we accepted that we couldn't supply our material for.
Now, Mr. Warren attaches a timeline of events, or at least a document which shows the timeline, and it seems to be the document at CEL 401081. If we can just have that up, please. And it runs over 2 pages. It looks to be a sort of chronological document, and it's not that straightforward, but it seems to start on the 6th of January 2014, which can't be right. So that must be 2015, with information about U values. And one can run down the page. There are different dates, different inquiries, and different answers, most of which come from either Jeremy Suttle, all of which come from Jeremy Suttle, actually, the technical officer. And then, if you look at the bottom of the page, 11th of February 2015, Damien McMahon, who's on Ardmore, who's already made 2 requests for information in December 2014 and January 2015, as you can see above, and in fact twice in that month, says at the bottom of the page, telephone conversation between Debbie Berger, product manager, and Damien explaining that RS5000 is compliant to a specific system as is made clear in our rain screen cladding guide. If the system proposed is not in line with that guide, then an alternative, if we can turn the page, products such as Rockwool should be considered. Also explain that the full fire test is a proprietary document and we would not be able to issue this document. Now, this advice, as encapsulated by that summary of that discussion, doesn't seem to tally with the advice that Ardmore felt that they had received as set out in Mr. Hunt's letter of the 23rd of March, does it?
No.
Can we look at CEL 403637, please? This is an email from you to Rob Warren, also on the Octavia Celotex non-compliance issues topic. And in the second main paragraph, you say, my view is we make the email back to him cover the following points, and then there's a long list of them. And you can see what they are. The first point is, you say, we successfully passed BS 8414 Part 2 last year and launched RS5000 in August 2014. Through our literature and technical guidance, we have made it clear of the components that make up the system, and in the case of Octavia Street, gave guidance to Ardmore that if their wall system differed from our tested build-up, then our advice would be to gain approval from the relevant bodies for this or use an alternative solution. Now, that's not accurate, is it? When you say there, through literature and technical guidance, we made it clear of the components that made up the system. That's just incorrect, isn't it? Because we know that the literature and technical guidance made no reference to the true components which were tested.
Yes, but based on, again, what I've said previously, in that's not in my, that's not even in my mind when I'm writing this, because of my understanding of what we'd done when we launched the product.
So you say, yes. I understand that. One way or the other, the concern that Ardmore had expressed didn't prompt you to suggest to your internal team that the product literature should be reviewed to see if it could be made clearer, to see if the caveat in it could be made clearer. We don't see any evidence of that.
No.
Is that right? So that really prompts the question why this was so complicated. If Ardmore had read and understood the caveat in your RS5000 marketing literature, then, Mr. Evans, all you had to do was simply answer his complaint by saying, well, we don't know why you're making such a fuss. Read our marketing literature. It says quite clearly in there, that the BS 8414 test is only for exactly the same systems as the test. Why didn't you do that? It would have been a very simple answer, rather than all this hand-wringing.
I don't know why we didn't do that.
Well, you don't know. Let me again suggest a reason. Because at the time, you knew very well that the marketing literature was at its most generous, sailing close to the wind, where a preference had been made to trumpet the availability of RS 5000 for use on all buildings over 18 metres, and put the caveat in the small print.
No, that wasn't what I was intending to do with the launch of the product.
Did it occur to you at the time that Mr. Hunt's complaint was a try-on?
Was a
Try-on. Wasn't really a genuine complaint, but was just a bit of commercial positioning.
I think it came, when it came into us, we, as I say, Craig, myself, maybe Paul, met, and I think our approach would have been, well, they clearly haven't read the literature. I think there was then this BWC desktop study that we weren't aware of, which I later saw in the evidence. And then in that Ardmore case, I think what made it more confusing for us is that we then found out that the complaint almost had gone because the NHBC signed off on the use of the product.
But just looking at the complaint, your reaction to it at the time wasn't, well, this is a try-on, they've read our marketing literature. You took this complaint extremely seriously, and you treated it as genuine.
Yes, we did.
Yes, and that's because I'm suggesting to you that it was genuine, and the reason it was genuine is because Ardmore had failed to grasp the point that you had tucked away in the marketing literature, that the qualification caveat that is to be found.
Yeah, maybe they hadn't read the literature or hadn't read the details of the system.
And did that not concern you, that your marketing literature was not sufficiently clear to big market players like Ardmore?
I don't believe so at the time. I think they've obviously used the product thinking they can use it, and then they were turning it back to the manufacturer on the basis that we hadn't made it clear, whereas in our view, we had made it clear.
Well, why didn't you go back to them simply with a 3-line letter saying, "Dear Mr. Hunt, I enclose a copy of each of the pieces of our marketing literature. You'll see the caveat on page 3 or whatever it would be in each of them. I trust this answers your query." It would have been very easy to do that. Why didn't you?
The discussions that I think we had with the other people from the business, we wanted to investigate it and then go back with a full answer.
And the reason I suggest that it needed all this internal investigation and further thought was precisely because you knew very well that the marketing literature, regardless of whether it accurately identified the true build-up of the test, was in and of itself misleading, or at least apt to mislead, and on this occasion had misled.
It wasn't, as I've said, it wasn't my intention with the literature to mislead. We had a system that we tested, and when we launched it, that was my understanding of how we were going to launch the system.
I would suggest to you that the honest businessman's approach to a complaint like that, if you had taken the complaint genuinely, which it seems that you did, and I'm not suggesting that it wasn't, so as to be clear, the honest businessman's approach to that would be to have started an internal discussion about how to improve the literature so as to make it absolutely crystal clear to the likes of Ardmore that RS 5000 should not be used above 18 metres in any system unless it was exactly the same as the system as tested. That would have been the honest thing to do, wouldn't it?
Which is my view on what we had done based on what I knew at the time of launching the product.
Well, that can't be right, because at the time of launching the product, you launched the product literature on which Ardmore were relying, hence their complaint. So you can't go back to the original launch. I'll put the question one more time. On the basis that Ardmore's complaint was a real and genuine complaint, wouldn't the honest approach to have had an internal discussion about how to improve the marketing literature so that people like Ardmore didn't make the same mistake again?
That is something we could have done, yes.
And you didn't do it?
We did look to improve the literature in the future off the back of other work that we were doing, but we didn't do it off the back of this, no.
No. And that's because you were quite content to keep peddling RS 5000 into an unsuspecting market and take the risk that some people might complain but others might not.
Again, that wasn't how I saw the product being launched.
Let's turn to the topic of further NHBC contacts in 2015. Mr. Chairman, this might be an appropriate moment for a break.
Yes, I was just wondering that. If you're going to a new topic, are you?
I am going to go to a new topic.
Right, well, I think we'll take a break at this stage. We'll have a short break again now. Mr. Evans, we'll come back at 25 to 4
Okay.
and see if there's some more questions for you then. Well, there will be.
Thank you.
So please don't talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room.
No.
Thank you. Right, 25 to 4, please. Thank you. Yes, would you ask Mr. Evans to come back in, please? Thank you. Right, Mr. Evans, ready to carry on?
I am.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes,
Mr. Evans, some more questions about NHBC. Can we go, please, to CEL 401088? This is an NHBC letter to Rob Warren of the 21st of April 2015. Do you think you might have seen this at the time? The title of it is Use of Combustible Materials Within the External Wall Construction of Buildings Over 18 metres in Height, if that helps your recollection.
Well, I know we went to meet with the NHBC in May of 2015, so this is possibly the letter that instigated that, so I believe
Right.
I would have seen it, yes.
And it's an update to the writer's letter of the 9th of February 2015, as you can see from the first line. You see that?
Yes.
It goes on to say in the background part, we're aware that some builders are specifying combustible components within the external wall construction of buildings with a floor level 18 metres or more above ground level. And it goes on to set out, in both summary and detail terms, the building regulations requirement. Then if we go to page 2, he says, what do the NHBC standards require? NHBC standards require compliance with building regulations and also that materials provide satisfactory performance. In addition, paragraph 9.8c of chapter 6.9, curtain walling and cladding of the NHBC standards advises that reference should be made to BR 135. Did that tell you anything you didn't already know, assuming you saw this letter at the time?
I wasn't as close to the actual NHBC standards as the technical team, but I don't believe that's anything different that the business didn't know.
Right. And similarly, under demonstrating compliance, Mr. Perrior, who's the writer, sets out guidance on 3 possible methods of demonstrating compliance: limited combustibility, BR 135, or desktop study. Again, did that, by that stage, tell you anything or tell the business anything that it didn't already know?
By that stage, we knew about BCA guidance from a month or so previous.
Can you explain why you say, or how come it was only 9 months or so after the technical guidance note, which had been published by the BCA in the June of 2014, that you came to know about it?
No, I can't explain other than the business and the team at the time in launching the product. There's other projects, lots of things. This wasn't the only thing we were trying to focus our time on, and it's we didn't know about it when we were launching the product.
Now, can we go to CEL 401087? This is the email to you from Rob Warren, which sent this letter to you, which I should have shown you before showing you the letter, but it doesn't matter. And he says in the second sentence, very interesting, as it now states that a desktop study is acceptable as a means of compliance. Does that tell us that it wasn't until then that it was clear to the business that NHBC were prepared to accept a desktop study?
That's my understanding, yes.
I see. Your response to this email is at CEL 403640. And you say useful to get official confirmation from them, though given the intel from Ardmore today, it makes it very difficult with the NHBC to be able to say a definitive yes or no, given that there could be specific detail changes in the design that we are not aware of. What was that a reference to?
My understanding is that the Ardmore project was given the go-ahead because there was something technical around the balconies or terracing on the building, and that's why the NHBC allowed it.
And then you say in the third paragraph, are you okay to suggest some dates to Graham, that's Graham Perrior, the writer of the letter? I'd rather have a face-to-face meeting on this than just respond in a letter. I think they need to be aware of the challenges we as a manufacturer now face on communicating where RS 5000 can and can't be used. We need to start working closer with them and can update them on where we are with our overall message on RS, as well as progress on desktop studies. Why would you want to have a face-to-face meeting with them rather than setting out your simple position in a letter?
I think it was just the style of how Celotex operated. There was always face-to-face meetings, and that was generally the preferred way of working.
I see. You say, as I've shown you, that they need to be aware of the challenges that Celotex as a manufacturer now faces. What challenges did you have in mind?
Linked to paragraph 1 with the Ardmore letter, and then the acceptance of our product being allowed on that scheme.
Can we go to CEL 403342, please? This is the 2015 budget, and it seems to have been a presentation for Les Miroirs for 14th of October 2014. Just help me, Les Miroirs, was that Saint-Gobain's glass-clad head office in Paris?
Yes,
Did you go to that meeting?
I believe so.
And the date of the 14th of October 2014, did you go to that meeting on that date?
That's the date of the meeting to present the budget for the next year, starting in January 2015. That was the general timeline that you had to present your budget in.
Who presented this slideshow at Les Miroirs?
I can't remember everybody that would have gone to the budget, but there was a number of people from the Celotex MAG team would have gone, so it was multiple people.
You went, did you? You went as you've told us. Did you do the presentation?
I would have done some of the marketing slides, yes.
I see. Can we go to slide 21, please, on page 21? This is a slide addressing 2015 actions, new build housing, and you can see under initiative, third item down, NHBC buy-in for above 18-metre applications, timing 2014 Q1. That probably ought to be Q1 2015, shouldn't it?
Yes.
Right. Budget £20,000. Now, what does NHBC buy-in mean or refer to?
I think that's a set of words which basically means NHBC approvals for above 18-metre applications.
And the budget of £20,000, what would that be spent on?
Based on where we were, I think desktop studies or additional testing that the NHBC might need us to do.
Well, wait a moment. You just told us that it wasn't until March, possibly April 2015, that you were aware that the NHBC would accept desktop studies. And indeed, I think you said earlier that it wasn't until March 2015 that you knew that the BCA guidance, which had been issued in the June of 2014, contained an option of desktop studies by way of compliance. How could the £20,000 be allocated possibly to desktop studies as early as October 2014, Mr. Evans? How does that work?
It may have been for additional testing. I used desktop studies, but it could have been for additional testing that we might need.
Right. I see. So the 20,000 you say could have been for additional testing. You don't sound terribly sure.
No, I don't recollect totally why that was in there.
Might it be a sum allocable for lobbying or making presentations to the NHBC to obtain what you call their buy-in?
No.
What form would NHBC buy-in take, as was contemplated at this time, do you think?
I think it was just RS 5000 being able to be used on some NHBC projects.
What had led you, mid-October 2014, to think that NHBC buy-in was required and sufficiently difficult to warrant a budget of £20,000 being allocated to it?
Based on what I've seen today, I can only look at the feedback that we were getting from the market on NHBC projects.
So this would be feedback between the beginning of August 2014, when RS 5000 was launched, and the middle of October 2014.
Based on those timings, yes.
So did you anticipate at this point, or by this point, that even though you had your 8414 test, the NHBC would not simply accept it and give you an endorsement for RS 5000? You had to go further, spend £20,000 on getting their buy-in.
I think we're accepting that we might need to do additional testing.
Right, so the £20,000 is additional testing, is it, in order to get buy-in? And you told us earlier there was no additional testing. What happened, so far as the NHBC buy-in was concerned, between the middle of October 2014, when you were considering spending that money on further testing, and March 2015, when you discovered the existence of the BCA Technical Guidance Note 18, which referred to desktop studies?
I don't believe anything in terms of additional testing.
No. So what was it? It was a limbo period. You didn't know about desktop studies, but you weren't doing any testing.
No.
So what was happening? How were you going about getting NHBC buy-in during that period?
Well, we're not being used on those projects.
So this is about 6 months that goes by, isn't it? Mid-October to mid-March, maybe 5.5 months or something like that. Why were you prepared to allow so long to go by without NHBC buy-in, in the absence of further tests or any desktop initiatives?
I don't know, just timings of other activities, possibly. Things that are listed on that slide.
Again, were you preparing or proposing simply to ride your luck until the NHBC came clear about what it was they wanted to do?
I don't think we were riding our luck. I think there was lots of other things happening in the business, not just RS 5000, and most of them are on that, a lot of them are on that slide there, which are big projects in terms of other development.
Now, going back to the Ardmore complaint, the 23rd of March 2015, to give it its date, can we look at CEL 403595, please? And I'd like to go to page 4. We'll come back to page 1 in due course, but page 4 is an email of the 25th of March 2015, and it starts at the bottom of page 3, as is typical. And you can see that he is sending you and Rob Warren and Louise Garlick some wording, being a draft position for the specification of RS 5000 and a set of words for both LABC and NHBC projects. Please be aware we have NHBC project inquiries where customers are awaiting a response. And then he sets out a set of drafts. And if we go to page 4, we can see the NHBC section of this email. A third of the way down the page. Where projects are subject to NHBC requirement, we will identify the given construction, and unless it exactly matches the specification given in our literature, we will advise that the use of Celotex is not supported. If customers ask for an official position, then they can be sent the set of words below. And that was what Jamie Hayes was proposing. That's very different, isn't it, from the marketing literature which had been approved in August 2014 and launched?
Yes, yes, it is different wording.
This is basically now telling the market that they shouldn't be using RS 5000 unless it exactly matches the specification given in the literature.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the set of words, as you can see below, thank you for your inquiry, the second sentence still contains the weasel words, and so can be considered for use in buildings above 18 metres. And then the last paragraph is where one gets the rather stiffer caveat. Where the proposed design differs from the tested system as outlined in our compliance guide, we would not recommend the use of Celotex RS 5000. Now, you saw that at the time. If we go up the page then and look at the bottom of page 1 and over to page 2, bottom of page 1, he says, thanks, Rob. I've identified some awkward questions that we could be asked, we need some guidance on. I meant to send these earlier. How do we handle projects for NHBC where calculations have already been provided? And then over to page 2, Where customers have had calculations for previous NHBC projects and now find our position has changed, how do we answer them? Now, just going to the first of those points, at the bottom of page 1, he describes that question as an awkward one. How do we handle projects for NHBC where calculations have already been provided? Why were those awkward questions? Why was that an awkward question?
I think from Jamie's perspective, being answering inquiries from clients, customers, the position and the wording has changed. Therefore, that's why he's seeing that as a potential awkward question that could come from previous inquiries.
And it was awkward, wasn't it? As was obvious, I would suggest, because the marketing literature on the basis of which RS 5000 had been launched had not set out the qualification, or the caveat as I would call it, in clear terms. And had it done, you wouldn't have had customers lining up to ask these awkward questions.
I just think we've launched a product, and we've learnt as we've launched the product and have been given feedback from the market based on our launch, and therefore we've needed to come up with additional statements such as this for the company.
And can you turn the page again, please, to page 2? Where customers have had calculations for previous NHBC products and now find our position has changed, how do we answer them? Is the change in position that he's referring to there, the change in position to make it clearer, that RS 5000 should not be used above 18 metres unless the system in which it was to be used exactly conformed with the system as tested?
Yes, I think it's just the fact that we're now saying something new that we hadn't said previously.
So market pressure and awkward questions from potential customers was now driving management into changing the way it presented RS 5000. Is that a fair...
As we learnt more from the market, we had to change some of the responses to inquiries, yes.
Yes. And really, this was just the coming home to roost of something that you had already really predicted at the time of the launch.
I just think we learnt as after the product was launched. There's more information coming into us that maybe we didn't know at other times.
And it can't have come as a surprise to you, could it, that all these players in the market were lining up with awkward questions such as those which Mr. Hayes has set out?
I think we always knew there would be questions that came from RS 5000 because of the nature and how different it was as a product launch for us.
And again, I make the point, why was any of this awkward? Why couldn't you just point each and every one of these customers to your marketing literature, which had been generated in the summer of 2014, and say, our marketing literature is perfectly clear, our caveat is in there if you read it properly? But that doesn't seem to have been a choice you ever made. Why is that?
I think we did say that, and I think it's just the fact that we've learnt more, there's more projects, people are coming to us, that we've needed to adjust what we're saying.
Well, I would suggest that it was really just, you knew very well that the marketing literature was misleading in the way in which we've established and wasn't crystal clear about the caveats. And when people started complaining about it, this was entirely a foreseeable result of that.
That's not how I thought the market was going to go, but I can see why people would think that.
Can we go then to CEL 403599, please? And at page 3, we can see your response to Mr. Hayes' original email about the suggested wording for responses. Jamie, I'm okay with these words to be used for projects currently in the Salesforce pipeline where we need to get back to people quickly. Following this, we should be looking to wrap communication around NHBC and RS 5000 into a consistent message that is then communicated into marketing, sales and technical, as well as the wider market. Please let me know of any other market feedback you get on RS 5000. When you say wrap a communication around NHBC and RS 5000 that is then communicated into marketing, what did that mean?
I think summarise, have a one communication.
Right. Now, Mr. Roper also responded the following day, on the 26th of March. CEL, same number, page 1, please. 3599, page 1. If we just look up to that. You can see his email there. It's a long email. I'm certainly not going to read it out to you at this hour. But in the third paragraph, he says, the note below also assumes that LABC and private building inspectors equally do not have the same reservations over ADB compliance as NHBC. But the recent publication from the BCA would indicate that it is only a matter of time before they are brought up to speed with the issues surrounding combustible insulation. We could therefore be in a similar position with buildings that are warranted by somebody other than NHBC. Does this mean that, in other words, Celotex knew that RS 5000 was being specified on some projects where NHBC was not involved, but that might change for the worse once the BCA was, to use Mr. Roper's words, brought up to speed?
Yes, I think that's what John is saying.
So you were taking advantage for the time being of the BCA not being up to speed and were concerned that that advantage might come to an end?
I don't recall thinking like that at the time, I think, but I can see why that's how that could be interpreted.
Yeah, well, that's because that was what was happening, I would suggest. No? You were taking advantage of BCA's leaden-footedness for the time being.
I think we were only aware of the BCA document at this time, so
CEL 40 is 3600, please. 3600. Email from Jamie Hayes to the various teams, tech department, copied to Louise Garlick and you, Mr. Evans, 27th March 2015. Good morning. With regards to RS 5000 inquiries for buildings above 18 metres, it is important that any changes to our policy in dealing with these inquiries is rolled out in a consistent way to our customers, sales team, and to the market in general. To that end, the advice we give to customers is to be reviewed by Paul Evans and the management team. If there was a need for consistency, were you not concerned that previous messaging had been inconsistent?
I'm not sure inconsistent. I just think that we're just needing to find a different way to, or different ways of communicating to clients as we've been in the market for longer.
Well, I'm not sure that's right, is it? I mean, he, Mr. Hayes, is saying to you that it's important that changes to your policy in dealing with inquiries that were coming in about RS 5000 were rolled out in a consistent way to our customers, sales team, and the market in general. And just to the reader, that does raise the question whether or not previous messages were inconsistent.
Yes, that could be implied. I would say that might be because Jamie's team are on the phone or answering emails, and maybe they don't have that consistent set of language to all say the same thing.
But what could be inconsistent? Why wouldn't they all have the same language to say the same thing?
I don't know. That's.
Well, might it be that there was some lack of consistency about whether or not they should be pushing the use of RS 5000 above 18 metres and not pointing up the qualification in order to get sales, on the one hand, for some people, but other people might be pointing up the qualification, on the other hand, and foregoing sales? Might that be the inconsistency to which Mr. Hayes is referring?
Maybe, I don't know.
You don't know. Did you not inquire? Did you not investigate what messages the marketing team, who were, of course, under your supervision, were giving customers?
The marketing team were under my supervision.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I thought this was to do with the technical team's message.
Well, it's changes. well, it's the advice given to customers. That's the point that Mr. Hayes is dealing with here.
Yes.
And how advice given to customers, whether it's by the technical team or by the sales team or by the marketing team, it doesn't matter. His concern was that there was a need for consistency in the messaging. And my question to you is, did his identification of a need for a consistent message not concern you? Or not alert you to the fact that there were inconsistent messages at that point or up to that point?
Not that I can remember, and also that I'm working with Jamie and Rob to make a set of words that can all be used.
If we go to CEL 403641, please. This is an email of 13th of March 2015 at 10:50. If we go to page 2, and a few days on from what we've just seen, Jamie Hayes sends an email, which is a change to a standard wording, being added to emails where a calculation was requested for buildings. It's a long email. And if we go to the bottom of page 2 and over to page 3, you can see it says, again, there's that mantra at the bottom of page 2, that because of the test, the Celotex RS 5000 can be considered for use in buildings above 18 metres. But again, we've been round that hoop a number of times. If we go to the top of page 3, this is the wording as he's now suggesting. Please find attached a copy of our rain screen cladding compliance guide, which gives details of our fire test and some background to the building regulations. And then it will be the responsibility of the building control body to judge compliance on a project-by-project basis. We would recommend showing them the compliance guide, the details of your proposed system, and have a discussion with them as early as in the design process as possible. Our tested system comprises an external rain screen facade, etc., etc. And then in the last line, it is critical that compliance is agreed before the design is finalised or work commences on site. Now, this is a very different message from the message conveyed in the original marketing literature, isn't it?
Yes.
And does that tell us that these changes were because of a concern in management that message, the message that is now in that draft, had not been uniformly conveyed until now?
Yes, I think there was, as we've had more feedback from the market, we've needed to have more different wording, clearer wording.
And it's not really surprising, is it, that you had all these awkward questions leading to this wholesale change in the wording of the literature, given statements in the literature such as the pink banner on each of the 3 pages at the top of the data sheet. Suitable for use on buildings over 18 metres.
It might have been because of those headline messages. That was never the intention.
No, but didn't you not ask yourself why it was that all these customers were coming in and asking all these questions?
Not at a time that I can recall, no.
CEL 401279, finish this line off, is an email following the adoption of these wordings and after the Ardmore situation appears to have been resolved, and this is the 23rd of April 2015, email from you to Rob Warren and Debbie Berger and Craig Chambers. And in that email, you go on to say at the bottom, well, three paragraphs up from the bottom, given NHBC have now written to us with their position on above 18 metres, and also the fact that facade systems, which we would assume are not compliant, are now being accepted due to building design details that we would struggle to be made aware of, we do need to respond to NHBC with our position on what we are telling the market. And then you say, whilst informing that RS might not be suitable for use on certain projects, I believe we need to revisit our wording here, as it could be that specific design details are incorporated into projects that we were not aware of and could be turning down projects by only having limited information. Now, notwithstanding the difficulties, I'll show you that, but it's clear that notwithstanding the difficulties you'd encountered with the NHBC and Ardmore, would you say that you were still concerned with ensuring the maximisation of sales of RS 5000?
There would obviously be a commercial consideration to be had in what we're doing. But my position from the start on this is that if there was projects which we can't be used for compliance reasons, then they're projects that we wouldn't be used on.
It was your position that Celotex shouldn't be adopting a line so cautious that it might result in the loss of sales.
I don't ever remember thinking about the sales impact on what we were doing. No.
I mean, that's certainly the effect or the impression given by the second of the two paragraphs I've read to you from that email. That you needed to revisit the wording because you might be turning down projects because you've got limited information.
Yeah, I think that comes down again to this Ardmore situation where we're not always got all of the information to know whether the project we can be used on the project or not.
But you would need information, would you? It's not about you needing information at all. You just need to get the message across that whatever the system is that they're going to use the RS5000 it has to be the same as the system tested. Why was that a problem?
That wasn't a problem.
Well, it was a problem if you were going to lose sales as a result of it, and that was something that it's quite clear from that paragraph you didn't want.
Just think it became we were getting more information again, and there was confusion and on certain projects.
Now, do you remember a meeting in May 2015 with the NHBC?
Yes.
Can we go to CEL 403682, please? This is an agenda for that meeting on the 19th of May. Do you know who prepared this agenda?
I don't recall, no.
We could see who was there from the NHBC, Graham Perrier and Dave White, and from Celotex, Debbie Berger, you and Rob Warren. And you can see the agenda. After the introductions, review of Celotex RS5000, and then NHBC compliance requirements. Now, you say in your statement, and we don't need to go to it, it's paragraph 180, that Mr. White was at one point quite rude to you at the meeting, interrupting you while you were speaking and suggesting that some aspect of Celotex's position on RS5000 was stupid. That's what you've recorded in your statement. Yes. But you don't remember what it was that he was talking about. Can you recall what Celotex's position on RS5000 actually was at that meeting?
At that point, it would have followed the position that we had in the business around the new wording that Jamie had put together and the compliance literature that we had.
Right, so when you say the wording Jamie had put together, that's in the last email I showed you?
Yes, I think it would have evolved into that wording as well.
I see. Then we can look at the May 15 update, CEL 403710, please. Was this prepared by you or by Mr. Warren? I think you say it was Mr. Warren who prepared that.
Yes.
And was that prepared for the MAG?
That was prepared for the MAG, yes.
And if we go to page 8, please, we can see a heading, Robust Argumentations.
Yes, that would be a section Rob would have populated.
Fire. Celotex meeting with NHBC was quite heated, every pun intended, with Dave White of NHBC being very vocal and, in our view, unprofessional in the manner in which he dealt with the points discussed. Is that a reference to the part of your evidence where he said that aspects of Celotex's position on RS5000 was stupid?
Yes.
It is. Is it a reference to anything else?
The main part of Dave White's behaviour at that meeting was around that point I made in my statement. I can't quite remember the rest of his demeanour for the remainder of the meeting. And
then 4 lines down, the NHBC's issue is that in their view, our fire test was not sufficiently representative of a typical rain screen system. Just pausing there, that had been the view expressed to you by Dave White, or perhaps in slightly more polite terms, and Graham Perrior at the 19th of June 2014 meeting, almost a year before, isn't it?
Yes.
So nothing had changed, had it then, in NHBC's attitude to your fire test?
Generally, I don't believe so, no.
Did it not concern you that the NHBC thought that your position was stupid? I know it may be rude and unprofessional, but didn't it concern you?
I think it concerned us, but I think there was a focus for the business to work with the NHBC to understand what we needed to do to be used on certain NHBC projects.
And then you go on. At some point, we will have to consider another test to broaden the scope of RS 5000. Now, it looks as if testing had now come back into onto the radar. What had happened to desktop studies?
I don't know. I think testing and desktop studies were always two options.
Well, yes, but we don't see any reference in there to doing a desktop study, other than the reference in the third line that you would look at the desktops, that the NHBC would look at the desktop study that they'd carried out with Exova. So that is there.
Yes.
But it doesn't seem that the contemplated strategy from there on in was to keep doing desktop studies to broaden the application. It was another test, wasn't it?
That's what Rob is suggesting there.
Yes. And then it says, until that time, that's the time of a new test, we will continue to maximise the potential of RS 5000 in non-NHBC jobs and the occasional NHBC job where the specific design of the building, due to balconies acting as fire breaks, for example, allows RS 5000 to be included. So, again, given that you are now looking at doing another test, can you explain why one wasn't done?
No, I can't.
Is it because you knew it would fail?
No, I don't believe that would have been a reason why we were thinking we wouldn't test.
Is it because you knew that without the 6 millimetres of magnesium oxide round the thermocouples in two places on the rig and the 8 millimetres of Marley Eternit that had been present on the rig in the May 2014 test, there was a very real risk that it would fail?
No, that wasn't in our thinking.
And with a failed test, you'd be absolutely nowhere, wouldn't you?
Yes, we would be, but that wasn't part of the reason why we hadn't tested.
Well, what was the thinking in not doing another test?
As I say, I don't know the specific reason other than other things happening in the department, in the business, that maybe just meant that wasn't able to happen for whatever reason.
But in the meantime, it seems that you were content to continue to sell RS 5000 into non-NHBC jobs. Did that mean that even if the cladding system was different from the cladding system tested, if the customer didn't pick it up, you'd be happy to make a sale?
We would be expecting the client to be aware of our guidance and also their understanding of that market.
Yes, so you were prepared to go on marketing with the new wording into RS 5000, knowing very well not only the fact that the NHBC weren't prepared to endorse it, but the reasons why.
We would have carried on selling RS 5000, yes.
Indeed. Can we look and see, and before I leave this document, I'll just pick up with you the point I've mentioned. In the second and third lines, you can see it says, on the positive side, the NHBC will look at the desktop study work that we've carried out with Exova to see if they accept the findings. So that, to be fair to you, was the position in May 2015. We can see how that turned out. CEL 402241, please. And if we go to page 2 in that email run, we can see that on the 8th of June 2015, Graham Perrier of NHBC writes to you, Mr. Evans, as well as Dave White within NHBC. And he is coming back with his initial views about the Exova report, the desktop. And if you cast your eye down to the 5th paragraph down, and one can read the detail if you want to of the first 3 paragraphs. I'm not going to read them aloud, but there are certainly questions that are studied throughout those paragraphs. He says, therefore, it appears that the basis for Exova's analysis does not reflect either a true model of a ventilated rain screen facade or take fully into account the fact that a large part of the Marley rain screen caught fire. Is it safe to say that when you saw that, you realised that the NHBC were not persuaded that the Exova desktop study done that thus far could be relied on?
We took those comments from the NHBC and relayed them to Exova for their response.
And how did that end up?
I believe there was responses between Debbie and Franz, and he assessed those and came up with answers.
And did you go back to NHBC with those answers?
I thought we did from evidence.
What was the NHBC's judgment on that?
I can't recall.
Did you ever get the NHBC's sign-off on a desktop study?
Can't say for sure, but I don't think so.
No. And we can see that they were extremely sceptical about the desktop study for the reasons they've set out. And that is even without knowing of the presence of the 6mm magnesium oxide in 2 places on the rig and the 8mm Marley rain screen at those points, isn't it?
Yes.
Would it be fair to say that had the NHBC known about those aspects of the test, they would have been even less impressed with Exover's work?
Yes, I think that's fair to say.
Can I just ask you 1 or 2 questions about the NHBC 2016 guidance? At CEL 403783 is a note, and it's dated the 18th of August 2015, and it's drafted by Tom Elwell of Celotex.
Yes.
Which department was he in?
He worked in the Celotex Technical Centre.
Right. And it's entitled NHBC and RS 5000. 3 options, and we can see them there. And then NHBC continue to offer resistance to using RS 5000 in rain screen cladding applications. Why? Do they ensure fire damage? Would they be liable for deaths? Part of the issue seems to be that they have allowed Kingspan to, quotes, get away with it, quotes, for a number of years, and they now feel they have to tighten up. Was that your impression?
I think during this time, it was difficult for our business to understand why Kingspan were being allowed to do what we were being told they were to do, and other manufacturers weren't.
Now, it's right, isn't it, that less than a year after this, the NHBC published guidance entitled Acceptability of Common Wall Constructions. Did you know that?
I know that now.
Well, let's see. It was June 2016. Let's look at it. CEL 401169. I think you'd left Celotex by this time.
No, I was still at Celotex.
You were still there. Did you look at this document at the time? It's dated actually July 2016, if one looks at the very bottom of the page. July 16.
I can't 100% recall, but it's something that, if it's come into the business, then it would have been something that would have been circulated. So.
Yeah. Can you look at the bottom right-hand corner? Common wall and facade types accepted by NHBC. The following common wall and facade constructions are acceptable to NHBC without the need to provide an option 3 assessment, providing that the design specification and installation meets the minimum specifications set out in the following appendices. Appendix 3, you can see, aluminium composite panels.
Yes.
Now, in your statement at paragraph 201, you say that you regarded this guidance as a positive development for Celotex, albeit not that surprising, given that RS 5000 was being used in the market and, to Celotex's knowledge, being approved by desktop studies for use in a variety of build-ups. Were you not surprised by this apparent volte-face, this change of position, about face, from the NHBC within less than a year?
It did seem surprising at the time, yes.
Was that change as a result of the lobbying of the NHBC by players in the market? I'm not necessarily including Celotex in that, but to achieve NHBC buy-in?
I don't know what other organisations or companies were doing. All I know is that we had met with the NHBC on a few occasions to talk about specific matters.
Do you know how this change in position within a year of the position as seen before came to happen?
No.
Had this guidance, when it came out, taken you by surprise?
I can't remember exactly what I remember at the time, but it did seem strange that we'd been from where we were to where we are now with being instantly approved.
What was your reaction when you saw it? Do you remember?
I can't remember, no.
Now, just briefly, do you remember that in 2017, before the fire at Grenfell Tower, Celotex decided to test RS 5000 to BS 476?
Yes.
Why was that?
we were being asked for copies of the Class O report for FR 5000, and Rob and I made a decision that we felt it would be better to retest the product as RS 5000 so that we could send a test report out that stated RS 5000, not FR 5000.
Can we go to CEL 50543, please? This is an email from Dr. Dane, Sarah Dane, to you, bottom of page 1. Dear Paul, you see that? Please see the results below from the Class 0 testing sent out in April. It shows a failure to achieve Class 0 on all of the products tested. The FR results are from trial formulations. I'll go through the results today to see if I can determine at what point in time the test failed.
Yes.
And that's August 2017. So that's after the fire.
Yes.
At Grenfell Tower. And then at the top of the page, Dr. Dane goes to Joe Mahoney and you and says, Dear Paul, Joe, please find attached the I values for the tests. Everything failed in the first 3 minutes of testing. The 100 and 160 products also failed during 4 to 10 minutes. That must have come as something of a shock.
It did, yes.
Do you know why they failed?
No, I don't.
I think you forwarded those results to Dean O'Sullivan, didn't you?
Yes, this was I remember this day because I was at a colleague's wedding as well as Joe Mahoney.
Right. Do you remember what you discussed with Mr. O'Sullivan about these results?
I called Dean once I'd sent those results to him and asked whether I needed to do anything that morning, and he said no, and it was picked up as part of the picked up within the business that day and going forward. And
it's also right, isn't it, that in November 2017 further testing was carried out. Were you aware of that?
I know that there was some work being done on Class O investigations during that period between August and November. I don't know too much of the detail.
Right. Can we look at CEL 409429, please? And we can see here that this is a letter from Exova, from a T-Mort to Joe Mahoney. And in the fourth paragraph it says, the tests were deemed invalid, as specified in clause 9.2 of the standard, due to deformation of the specimens blocking the burner ports of the gas burner of the test apparatus such that the required gas input could not be maintained. Did you discover that the November tests had failed in that way? Did Mr. Mahoney discuss these with you?
I can't remember.
Right. Were you aware that the subsequent tests in 2018 had passed?
No.
You didn't know anything about that. Right. And I think it's right that shortly after these tests you were then subject to disciplinary procedures, weren't you?
Yes.
And they were in relation to your involvement in Celotex's practice around calculating its declared lambda.
Yes.
And then you resigned as a result, I think, in December 2017.
I did.
Can I just ask you one question? If you go to your second witness statement where you deal with your disciplinary procedures, CEL 30is12233 at page 7, paragraph 31. You say in paragraph 31 on page 7, it is for others to assess whether the disciplinary processes were also orchestrated to remove senior members of the business out of Celotex before the Grenfell inquiry commenced. What do you mean by that?
I mean that I feel there was a opportunity for Celotex, having understood how lambda was being calculated in the business and had been as a process, something that was done for a long time. I think they, and with a lot of people from the previous ownership, and as well as many members of the first Saint-Gobain mag moving on, I think it only left 2 or 3 people that would have been aware of the lambda regime purely because we had been in the business a long time, and my view is that Celotex used that as an opportunity to remove those people from the
Are you
business.
saying that the Lambda fiasco was being used as an excuse to conduct a purge?
I think Celotex, in my opinion, had a strategy. Yes.
Well, are you saying that Celotex had decided to use the Lambda affair as an opportunity to purge some of the older members of management?
Yes.
Are you saying that that was unjustified?
I feel that it was based on that process for Lambda, which was a decision made many years before and by statutory directors of the company, and how that just became integrated as part of a ongoing process in our business. I felt that was, yes, I felt that was unfair.
Mr. Evans, I've no further questions for you. Thank you very much. There may be some questions which come from somewhere else, but Mr. Chairman, I note the time. It's
Well, we
4:30.
better deal with them now, hadn't we?
We had better deal with them now, but we ought to take the usual break just to
Yes.
make sure that
Well,
I've
I'll
got no
just
further
explain to
questions as
Mr.
well.
Mr. Evans, although Mr. Millet's finished the questions that he thinks he needs to ask, we always have a short break at this point to give counsel time just to check that there's nothing he's overlooked,
Okay.
and also to take into account questions that may have been submitted by people who are not in the room but following the proceedings quite closely. So we'll take a break now. 10 minutes enough, Mr. Millet?
Should be, Mr. Chairman.
Right, well, I'll say 10 minutes,
Okay.
which means we'll be back here at 20 to 5. Sometimes it takes a little longer, and if so, I'm afraid we'll all be held up. But
That's fine. I
we'll
understand.
try and get back at 20 to 5. And as before, please don't discuss your evidence or anything to do with it with anyone else while you're out of the room.
Thank
All
you.
right? Thank you very much. Would you like to go to the usher then, please?
Thank you.
Right, Mr. Millet, we'll say 20 to 5.
Yes.
But of course, as usual, if
If I need
further
more
time
time,
is actually required, then you can let us know.
that would be helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Would you ask Mr. Evans to come back, please? Thank you. Right, Mr. Evans. Well, we'll see if Mr. Millett's found some more questions for you.
Okay.
Have you found some more questions, Mr. Millett?
I have one or two, Mr. Chairman, but really one or two. And now, Mr. Evans, can I ask you please to go to CEL 401042? This is an email from Jonathan Room on the 28th of November 2014, second email down on the page, to you and to Debbie Berger. Subject, Celotex RS5000 BRE testing, 190 Strand. Hi Paul, Debbie. I've spoken to Total Facade Solutions about potentially giving us guidance as to how to move forward with RS5000 testing. We would need to employ them directly. Andy Jones is one of the most knowledgeable people in the facade industry and advises the likes of the Barclay Group as to what products comply. Please let me know if you would be willing to employ them as a consultant, even if it is only for one day. And you went back to him on the 1st of December and said, let's discuss as part of our plans for 2015 when we meet on the 19th, which I think would have been the 19th of December. Did you discuss Mr. Room's proposal to engage Andy Jones when you met him?
I don't believe so. I don't think there was any follow-up on that point, or we discussed it on that meeting.
No, and indeed Mr. Room confirmed in his evidence that Celotex never did engage Total Facade Solutions. And his evidence was, and this is day 69, page 149 at line 5 to page 150 at line 5, he said that it must be that I was told, no, that option wasn't available or wasn't going to be considered. Do you remember telling Mr. Room that you weren't going to take his proposal forward?
I don't remember that, no.
Can you explain otherwise why that proposal was not taken forward?
No, I can't explain why we didn't take it forward either. Just
Are you saying that he's wrong? That you told him, you didn't tell him no? Or
I can't remember telling him no.
what was the reason why it was never taken forward? Do you know?
No, I don't know.
Would have been sensible, wouldn't it? Looking back on it.
On reflection, yes.
And that takes me to the last question, Mr. Evans. We've been through a lot of evidence over the last day and a half or so, and given your position within Celotex at the time, looking back on that evidence and looking back on the experiences up to and including the day of the fire, is there anything that you, looking back on it, would have done differently?
I think everything I've seen and during this, during the evidence I've given and preparing for it is that it was a totally different type of project for our business, for the size of business and for the experience that the people in the business had. And it needed a lot more attention, focus, investment, time, not all of the other things that were part of working for Celotex. And I believe if we'd have had some of those or all of that in place and the business had have understood that more, different decisions would have been made and ultimately we wouldn't have launched the product.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Evans. It only remains for me to thank you very much for coming here and assisting us with your evidence. We're extremely grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, Mr. Evans, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the panel for coming to give your evidence. It's taken a lot of your time, I understand that. But your evidence has been very useful to us.
Thank you.
And we're very grateful to you for coming to give it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now you're free to go.
Thank you.
So if you'd like to go with the usher, she'll look after you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Millett. Well, that must be it for the day.
It is it for the day, I'm glad to say. Mr. Chairman, I'm grateful for your...
Tomorrow.
Yes, I'm grateful for your sitting late, the entire panel sitting a little bit later than we would normally. Tomorrow we have Mr. Jamie Hayes, who's going to come to give evidence. He will last in most, if not all, of the day. That means, unfortunately, there has to be an amendment to the scheduled programme, which is that Debbie Berger now won't be coming to give evidence tomorrow, but we are making arrangements with her to come during the course of next week, late next week, and we will be updating all core participants and members of the public accordingly as soon as we can.
Thank you very much. Good. Well, then we'll finish there for the day and resume tomorrow at 10 o'clock, please.
Yes, thank you.